Okay, today we're going to talk about aluminum. I mentioned this a little bit in the toxins video of the core series, but aluminum is worth focusing on because it is the most ubiquitous toxic metal. Everyone is high in aluminum. You can test for this, and we'll talk about that in this video, but in all HTMA, which is hair tissue mineral analysis testing, and oligoscan testing, everyone is high in aluminum. And for a large majority of people, I would say it's 70–75%, it is the highest metal of all of the metals that people have. So we need to talk about this because it affects bioenergetics, it affects brain function and cognitive function, it affects connective tissue health and bone health. So let's jump in here. Aluminum is the third most abundant element in the Earth's crust. And what's interesting about aluminum is that if you look here at the chart, you can see that oxygen is the majority element, silicon is next, and aluminum is third, representing about 8%. However, it is the highest element that has no physiological function. We use oxygen all the time, and we use silicon a lot for connective tissue, but we don't have any purpose for aluminum physiologically in the body. Environmentally, we're exposed in the air, in the soil, in the water, in the food supply. It's in antiperspirants, it's in kitchenware and cookware like aluminum foil and aluminum pots and pans. It's in the adjuvants in vaccines, in the vaccine schedule. As a result of its ubiquity, it's impossible to avoid. So it's imperative we understand what kind of damage it does and how to mitigate that. So you may ask, where is it all coming from? And this is a little bit of a side quest, but let's talk about it so we understand it. Aluminum is mined from what's called bauxite ore. And basically bauxite is aluminum hydroxide. And it is used in metallurgy, it's used everywhere, and it's becoming increasingly more mined. It is a critical commodity for not just metallurgy, but now it's critical for the rare earth mineral industry. Basically, it's used as a substrate or alloying agent. And rare earth minerals are driving a big market sector for defense as well as for batteries and all kinds of new technology. So the point is that this exposure that we're getting is not going away. It's going to increase over our children's lifetime and our grandchildren's lifetime. Let's start with looking at the negative impacts that aluminum has on the brain. It's been known for a long time that aluminum is highly neurotoxic, with research and clinical observations linking aluminum to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, ALS, autism spectrum disorder, and other cognitive impairments. And what's been learned about its toxicity is that it predominantly is a process of immunoexcitotoxicity. And so what that essentially means is that most of the aluminum accumulates in the immune system portion of the brain, known as the microglia. As a result of that, it causes excessive release of excitotoxins, and specifically glutamate. It does drive pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines, but it looks like the major effect is an overstimulation of the immune system. There's a very well-known aluminum researcher by the name of Chris Exley, who has been researching aluminum for 35 years now, and he has looked at the brains of people with MS, the brains of people, when I say that, I mean autopsied the brains of people with autism spectrum disorder, with also Parkinson's disease, and has found that aluminum is very high in these cases, and that it looks like a causal driver of these neurodegenerative diseases. Another area that it has a lot of detriment, and this is more of a silent area, it has the ability to displace silicon and bind to silicon. And silicon is a requirement for making connective tissue. I see so many connective tissue tears and weaknesses, things that are just simple, stepping wrong, suddenly you get a tear, and they take a long time to heal. Now, I'm not saying that this is the prime cause, but I do think it's a contributing factor, because if you don't have silicon because it's being bound up by that aluminum, you are not going to be making enough collagen, and you will not be able to make it in its most steady, sturdy, robust format. And so the profile of somebody that has high aluminum and low silicon is a high risk scenario for musculoskeletal injuries. Aluminum also has an affinity for the bone. And the reason for this is because it binds to phosphate too. And phosphate is required for making bone. So basically bone is hydroxyapatite, which is basically a mixture of calcium and phosphorus, and aluminum will bind to that. And it has been known for a long time that aluminum will actually create porous and softer bones. Additionally, it can suppress parathyroid hormone, or PTH, which essentially will begin the process of moving calcium out of the bone into the soft tissue. This is a whole separate problem that usually is triggered by the lack of calcium, dietary calcium. But in the case of somebody who has aluminum toxicity, which is kind of everyone, this is a contributing factor to calcium deposition into the bone, or lack thereof. And lastly, and arguably the most important, is that, from a pro-metabolic or bioenergetic standpoint, it's well known that you need magnesium to activate ATP to drive many enzymatic reactions. Most people are magnesium deficient. We're talking about intracellularly magnesium deficient. Additionally, aluminum binds to ATP 107 times stronger than magnesium does. So in the cell, when you have the situation of high aluminum and low magnesium, this aluminum is binding to ATP, and it's essentially locking up energy from being used, blocking the release of the phosphate, which is occurring in these enzymatic reactions. So it's critical from an energy standpoint that we lower the aluminum burden, and then we offset the magnesium deficiency by supplementing. The ATDSR, which is an organization managed by the CDC that provides toxicology guides, says that the average healthy adult has about 30 to 50 milligrams of aluminum as total body burden. Recently, I interviewed Clark Engelbert, and he's a mineral balancing specialist that focuses on aluminum detox with clients using minerals. And he's looked at over 2,000 HTMA tests. He's told me that he estimates that for someone who has neurodegenerative symptoms, or symptoms of any of the cognitive impairments I talked about before, that it is more likely 60 to 70 milligrams as total body burden. Now, all of that is not going into the brain. The primary storage point for aluminum is the bone. There is also a storage area in the lung, and there's also storage area in the brain. However, the brain is the most sensitive and the most reactive to the aluminum toxicity. These results are from the oligoscan. And so what I want to point out here is mineral antagonism. So as you can see, this particular person has very high aluminum, and as a result of that, they have low silicon and calcium. Now, all four of these minerals can be dysregulated by high aluminum, but it doesn't always look like this. What it always does look like to me is they have low silicon, and this is the only element that this element can only be measured in oligoscan. You can't see it in urine, and you can't see it in HTMA. But in all cases, silicon is low. Sometimes magnesium is also low. Sometimes phosphorus is also low. Sometimes calcium is fine. So it's these four elements that do get dysregulated. And I was telling you before, I think the most functional way to look at this is lower your aluminum burden to the point of getting asymptomatic and or rebalancing these top 4 minerals. Now, the good news, what do you do about it? This same researcher I mentioned before, Chris Exley, has shown that drinking silicon-rich mineral water is a very effective way at getting aluminum out of your body. And this is because aluminosilicate compounds, they bind very easily together. And this is what happens in nature, in the Earth's crust, is a large portion of the aluminum, not the bauxite, but the other portion of aluminum is bound to silica. And so by taking the silica-rich water, you can actually eliminate aluminum. Great news. The other thing that he found was that you can get a very large amount of aluminum elimination in human sweat. And in this study, he found that among this cohort of 20 healthy volunteers, there was between a 234 and a 7,192 microgram elimination of aluminum per day in perspiration. So if we convert that into milligrams, on the high end, that's about 7 milligrams of aluminum elimination from sweat. Now, if you are healthy and you have, let's be conservative here, 50 milligrams of aluminum in your body, and you were drinking silicon-rich water and you were sweating regularly, you don't want to do that every single day. That's more of a 2 to 3 times a week practice. You could get rid of your aluminum levels. You could lower them down to physiological relevant ranges so that you were balancing your minerals in pretty short order. So just to recap and also talk about some other things that you can do. So minimize the aforementioned exposures. So make sure that your antiperspirant, your cookware, the vaccines, all of that stuff, you are eliminating all of that. Also, drinking silicon-rich water, sweating regularly, 2-3 times a day. But in addition to that, I think supplementing magnesium is critical. Most people that I see are deficient in magnesium. We're just not getting enough from the diet. Additionally, stress causes the kidneys to excrete more magnesium, and everyone is dealing with some form of stress. So supplement magnesium either in the glycinate form, the taurate form, or the malate form. And you need to increase your daily intake of calcium and phosphorus. So dairy is the perfect food because it has calcium and phosphorus in the right balance. Plus it has many other minerals and nutrients that you need. Dairy is a good form, but a combination of dairy and meat and these kinds of things are excellent sources of calcium and phosphorus. And these cover the 4 minerals that are antagonized by aluminum. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.